listening to the Mark Bradford Alchemy for Life podcast.
Type A personalities and retirement. Well, hey there. Welcome back. Let's talk about personality types. And instead of talking about the myriad of personalities out there, I want to narrow it down to something that's just sort of a yes or no. And that is the type A personality. Are you a type A personality? The odds are that if you are listening to this kind of podcast, you may have been categorized as type A. And if you look it up, a type A is a pattern of behavior and personality that's typically associated with high achievement, competitiveness, and even impatience. You know, it's the movers, the shakers, the doers, the people who rise to be, managers, presidents, all that stuff, right? You can certainly be a solopreneur and be a type A. And in fact, if you're a solopreneur, you probably are that kind of personality. So let's just assume you are. It probably means you focus a lot on productivity, right? And productivity to you is very meaningful, as it is for a lot of people. But there are people who are productive who don't consider to be particularly meaningful because they're not productive in the things that they enjoy. If you go to work and work the conveyor belt all day long and come home, well, that's your job. And again, you can always refer to the Job, Career, or Calling podcast for a bit more definition on that. So let's say you're in the perfect scenario. You're a type A doing your type A stuff and you're just whizzing by. You just absolutely love it. You're being productive and you're competitive with others in your field, and you know that you keep excelling and success and all those words you say on LinkedIn over and over again, right? And then one day, the rather large corporation you work for says, "Hey, Bill, what do you think of early retire? Oh, you'd like that? Oh, you don't have a choice? Okay, great. You're going to go into early retirement." Now, you as the type A personality have been sort of dreading this. You've been thinking to yourself, yeah, I know I eventually have to retire, but I kind of want to do this as long as they'll let me. And you think of that date as some far off date, just like we take the date of something that we don't really want to do and we just put it out of our head. We say, it's not on my radar. It'll eventually happen, but I'm not thinking about that today. Today, I have to keep these numbers. Today, I'm doing this. I'm having a good time. And you think, okay, I'm going to make some promises to my future self. Yes, I'll retire, and I don't know, I'm gonna garden a lot, or I'm gonna do this, or I don't know, maybe something my wife or husband does is something that I'll find useful. I don't know. I don't care. I don't think in those terms. Dude, I got to keep things moving. But then it happens, and you're no longer allowed to do the things that you did that you found to be meaningful. And I guess that's the key word, isn't it? It's not just productive, it's meaningful. Now, if you're a solopreneur, you're just gonna keep going until you just drop dead, because that's just the way it works for you. Unless it's something that requires a certain level of physical acuity, and then obviously that's something that you're not going to be able to do to the last day. But most solopreneurs who do a thing are going to try to keep doing that thing. But people in the corporate world sort of have a switch turned off on them. And it's very jarring. And let me tell you that from indirect experience and dealing with and working with people who have to retire. And the concept of have to retire is just basically a flavor of have to take a turn, have to adjust. It's the same sort of thing, whether you are purchased out of a company that you were into, or whether your market doesn't support something anymore, or whether you produce something that a new technology makes it obsolete and therefore your really cool product no longer has a place. All those things are the same occurrences. They're the same thing in your timeline in which you can look at the line and look how it took a left turn to 90 degrees. Well, then what? So here's the interesting thing. Your desire and feeling about being productive and doing something meaningful is a byproduct of the thing you were doing, but it's not the thing you were doing, because it can come from other sources. And It does. I mean, there are some people that from, the time they were 4 years old, they did a thing and they just kept getting more advanced, but they were doing that exact thing. But those people are a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of the population. For most people, what they did evolved. If you're in the creative space, then you may have literally jumped from, perhaps that's not literally, I take that back. You may have jumped from one kind of creativity to another. You may have jumped from one medium to another, and yet you thrived and you flourished and you enjoyed it. So here's the cool thing for people who are in early retirement or switching jobs or switching tracks or whatever metaphor you want to use, people who have to make a huge turn in life for what they do to become productive or meaningful. In my Alchemy for Life system, in which I define life as being three things: time, energy, and resources, we can see where that is being directed. We further see where it's being directed by applying it to this balance sheet I created, which basically breaks down your life into 5 facets. And the interesting thing about these 5 facets, and they're things like productivity and fun, rejuvenation, spirituality, etc. Almost without exception, something that you find to be meaningful in your life is typically on more than one column. So in other words, if you have an activity that you consider to be productive and you make money at it, but it's also in the column of, let's say, fun and rejuvenation because you're really jazzed to do it. And it could be in the column of learning because part of what you do is actually absorbing and disseminating knowledge, like a podcast, let's say. You'll find something like that to be fulfilling. And it's also kind of a litmus test for a job. So that brings us back to someone who is in early retirement. Now, there are people who have been doing a job or career. It's certainly not a calling for them, and they make a good deal of money doing it. But it's kind of a narrow band sort of, I do this thing, I do this thing, I do this thing. And it's productivity for them. But it might not really be all that meaningful. Because in one of the scenarios for someone retiring, they may be extremely productive for their corporation, but when they look at their other columns, that's not where their fun is. Their fun is this thing that they get to do twice a year with their wife. They get to go off and do a thing. I use the example in one of the podcasts where someone makes a great deal of money that funds their calling, and their calling is that they go out to Africa and they do some humanitarian stuff. So take that CEO that's now going into early retirement and contrast that with someone who's, let's say, a teacher who makes not a huge amount of money, but they feel very productive in what they're doing because they know they're making a difference. It's productive obligation because they're getting paid for it. It's their job, but they're working with kids and that really rejuvenates them. So that's how they get recharged, and they're imparting knowledge. So they have to keep up on a certain fast-paced kind of thing. Let's say computer-related stuff, because you don't learn computer stuff in 1980, and that's what you use now. I mean, every single year it's changing, new technologies, new commands, software, hardware, all that stuff, new breakthroughs. So you're constantly learning. So that person has 3 of their columns filled out by one single activity, which is the thing they're getting paid for. If that person goes into retirement, well, that's a loss on 3 columns of an item. So that's a big deal to them. So what do these people do? That's what you're asking. Okay, Mark, I get it. I'm on board. I'm scared now. What do people like this do? What do we do when we retire? Well, if you ever watch some of the commercials of people retiring and then, doing their dream stuff, it's typically somebody who does what looks to be a rather boring focus job, and then they go out and they do something that looks kind of fun. Well, why can't it be both? Why can't the thing that's productive for you be both? A financial advisor is someone who's going to help you to manage the productivity part of that in so much as it reflects income. But then you're going to have to determine what's next. Or you are if you don't engage with someone like me, in which we can map it all out for you and not only see where you are now, but where you'd like to be. So if you'd like to know more about this whole balance sheet concept and life is made of 3 things and the 5 facets and all that, please reach out to me and all the many channels I'm available, including LinkedIn and email and on the website, the Alchemy for Life website and so forth. And we can actually look at your balance sheet right now and see. And so instead of you falling off that cliff at the end of this switch of life, you can just take a turn and enjoy it. Thank you. Thank you for listening. I love your feedback as always. Keep it coming. I always appreciate if you like, share, subscribe, and all that nonsense. And if you don't, that's cool too. By now, my new novella, The Devil's in the Details, has hit the shelves. If you like a smoldering, quick read, then you may love reading The Devil's in the Details. Check it out.